Hello, Kaiju lovers. Nate here, coming to you OOC once again. Yes, another week without a new MIFV episode. I get it. You might be getting a little bit frustrated. I totally understand. I am working on them. I promise you. I've got a bunch of episodes recorded. In fact, I just recorded another one last night. We'll be recording another one tonight. So, they are coming. It's just that post-production, due to a lot of things, is getting in the way, but I assure you, they are coming. The upside is that you'll be getting new episodes a little bit more frequently in order to catch up. So, there is a silver lining to this whole thing. And you know what else is a silver lining? What you're about to hear right now. This is an episode of Kaiju Weekly from a few months ago that I did with Michael Hamilton, my co-host on the Power Trip podcast. This is one of his other podcasts that he does, and it was over Pacific Rim The Black, the second season of the Netflix anime based on the incredible movie. I had been intending to share this at some point, and given that one of my next episodes is going to be on Pacific Rim, the actual movie, I figured why not? I need another placeholder. I was planning on sharing this anyway, so here you go. Now, this is an abridged version of the episode. I took out the game that I played with Michael, which I came up with myself. I called it, what did I call it? Jaeger or Racehorse. A better name would have been Hunter or Horse, where I rattle off names of both Jaegers and racehorses to see if Michael could guess which was which. And I also cut out the mailbag segment at the end where we answered comments from Kaiju Weekly listeners, and it sparked a fun little discussion, a very fanboyish discussion. I can't exactly remember what it was, but I know it was pretty fun. So if you want to hear the full episode, check out the link to it in the episode description, and go check it out on whatever is your podcatcher of choice. Regardless, you're about to hear the full discussion that we had of the second season. I did something similar when I was on Kaiju Weekly about a year ago, I think, for the first season. So if you want to hear my thoughts on the first season, that is in this feed as well, or you can listen to the Kaiju Weekly episode. All right, without further ado, give this a listen and keep watching because you got a lot of great content coming from the Monster Island Film Vault.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Kaiju Weekly, the weekly podcast that introduces you to the wide world of giant monster movies. I am your host, Michael, your guy for Sentai, and with me is my co-host in common for the Power Trip podcast, Mr. Nathan Marchand. How are you doing, good sir?
Why did it take 7 months for me, the captain of the Kaiju Weekly B team, to get invited back? I don't appreciate this.
Moving on. So we have a really good episode planned for you guys today. We're going to be talking about something that just launched on Netflix. So this episode is both...
and it launched right after the last thing you talked about.
Yeah, we're doing like we're doing two very timely things back to back. And I guarantee you, dear audio listener, I'm going to be in a much better mood than what I was last episode.
Are you sure? Because this week's topic is kind of mean.
It's kind of mean and it's kind of bittersweet, and it does there are some gut punches that happen, and no spoilers yet. There will be spoilers. I should probably say that there will be spoilers. So if
this is going to be very, very spoilerific. Yeah. And you know what else is getting spoiled?
What?
Elijah's lead. I'm winning, Mr. Thomas.
No one cares.
I'm bringing that back.
And no one cares. Anyway, so just an FYI to anyone listening, we will let you know when we're getting ready to talk about the actual topic for today's episode. But I want to let you guys know, if you've not seen Pacific Rim the Black yet, go and watch that first before you listen to this episode, because we will be doing spoilers. So if you don't want to be spoiled, go watch that, then come back to this episode.
Yeah. And we should also let all of your listeners know that there's a reason I'm here. Well, I was planning to be here for a while, but you'll be noticing that our co-host in common, I don't know how many people get that joke, but I'm going to keep using it. Travis is not here. He's not been having a very good day, needed to take the week off. So it's just the two of us today, which is totally fine. But as you would expect, in third chair today to help make sure that everything goes smoothly, even with Travis absent, is my intrepid producer on the Monster Island Film Vault, a Mr. from NASA, Jimmy.
Oh, yeah, sure. Come on. Who let this guy in here?
Well, somebody's got to make sure that things go all right without Travis here. I mean, it's just like the old saying, when the Tanuki's away, the ferret and the Shiba dog will play.
The what? The Tanuki. Okay,
yes,
never mind.
Our spirit animals.
We did it all.
Travis gave us all spirit animals.
So we did it all for the Tanuki. The Tanuki. and you can take this cookie and shove it. Well, never mind. We're not going there. I'm
glad I came prepared with my soundboard. Mm-hmm. We're gonna add a little bit of production value to this week's episode, I'm sure. But yeah.
Well, I hope so. So we don't have any news to cover. There was some tidbits of news, but we'll talk about those when Travis comes back next week. Now, Nathan, it is time to dig into our main topic, and that is Pacific Rim the Black. Season 2. Yeah, and the reason why we're just gonna go straight to it is because we forgot to ask the trivia question this week. So
shame.
So yeah,
shame. Where's that? Where's that meme from Monty Python and the Holy Grail? Shame.
So Nate, would you like to read our cast and crew list for this?
For this, we have Gideon Adlin as Haley Travis, and then Callum Worthy as Taylor Travis, Ben Diskin as Kaiju Boy, and Victoria Grace as May. So, Hey, Tay, and May, which was the joke that we made the last time I was on here, because I was on here last year to talk about season 1.
And you're lucky we brought you back.
You missed me.
Ha! I get to talk to you all the time, bud. Jeez.
Your listeners missed me. I've looked at your analytics.
Our listeners have better taste than that. Anyway.
That's not what your analytics say.
Do you also have a plot breakdown? Funny or otherwise?
Out in the middle of the post-apocalyptic Australian outback with no Mad Max in sight, our brother and sister hero duo and the very angry anime girl are doing their best to make it to Sydney base while also dealing with a literal kaiju kid and while being chased by the incredibly creepy kaiju death cult, the Kaiju Sisters. And hoo boy, they are a freaky lot, let me tell you. So, will our heroes be able to elude the sisters without stabbing each other in the back, sometimes literally, and make it to Sydney base while also, having to deal with a Shyamalan twist that they weren't expecting?
Nathan, I really enjoyed season 1 of The Black. I really did. And I had high expectations for season 2. Now,
and after the buzzkill that you had with Ultraman,
after the buzzkill that I had with Ultraman, I went into it with tempered expectations, and I think that actually worked to its benefit because, oh boy, Like this whole this season takes you on an emotional roller coaster. I feel like with like just some really high highs and some really gut punchy lows, and in fact,
Yeah, this is not. I think we talked about this in the last episode for season 1. This is not your "we're canceling the apocalypse"
mhm.
happy rah rah Pacific Rim. No, this ooh, this takes a very unflinching look at some pretty dark subject matter.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I'm just gonna say this now. If you haven't watched this Pacific Rim: The Black, stop it. Stop now because we're gonna be talking spoilers in 3, 2, 1. And to open up this discussion, I'm actually going to quote Haley from the last episode that I think kind of sums up the, because I asked you before we recorded this, like, what is the theme of, and we on the Power Trip, if you've not listened to the Power Trip, our Power Rangers podcast, we like to talk about themes. And I asked you, Nathan, before we recorded, what did you think the theme was for Pacific Rim: The Black? And I think that this quote from Haley Travis kind of sums it up. This is when she's talking to Marshall Rask, and she's talking about Boy. And they discover that Boy is no longer a weapon, but he is now a friendly. So she says, like everyone else in the Black, he emerged very changed from when he went in.
Mm-hmm.
So this whole season is about, like, well, this whole experience, I think, to sum up like season 1 and season 2 of the Black, it's a really just it's a hope story. It's a hopeful story.
Mm-hmm. It's
It's
also coming of age,
it
because that's
is
what
it's
she's talking about. It's like they went through adversity, and adversity changes you.
It does. Yeah, it does. Some people changed for the better and some people changed for the worse. And, some of the people that changed for the worse are the ones that will punch you in the gut when you watch this. Specifically, Haley and Taylor's mother, who we later find out has become a,
Twist.
yeah, who has become,
We kind of thought they were dead in season
mhm.
1.
We assumed they were dead.
Yeah, we assumed they were dead, and then it turns out, oh, mom's alive. She's part of the kaiju death cult.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't see that one coming.
And that whole episode with Shane going with Shane drifting with her,
Shane.
to go get her back and bring her to her sanity. That was an
As
incredibly emotional.
Tokyo Lives called him, he's Mr. You did.
Yeah, did.
You did.
But it was an
He's the
incredible.
most Australian sounding person in the entire show.
Well, after the other guy dies, he is literally the only Australian sounding. Well, no,
you mean the crazy old man with one arm?
Yeah, old lefty, but he lost his right arm. Yeah, that was kind of a little bit of a gut punch too, because I really wanted to like that guy, and what little bit of time we spent with him, he was a really likable character, but he was a little bit of an
Yep.
ideologue. He
Yeah.
thought that he could control. He thought that he could control kaiju.
He was supposed to be a kaiju whisperer. He was Bunyip Man. I looked at
Yeah.
him. Bunyip Man.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. I honestly thought he was going to stick around for more than one episode. He made an impression. I'll say that. He was
He did.
memorable.
Oh yeah.
Memorably foolish in the end, but memorable nonetheless.
Well, he was very idealistic, and sometimes when you get so idealistic, you're blinded to the reality that's in front of you. And the reality was, these are gigantic creatures with a mind of their own, and you can't control them.
Yeah.
They're essentially, I mean, I guess you if you could equate it to, zookeepers. You see like zookeepers that have a bond with a certain animal. There's a couple of TikTok accounts that I watch, and a couple of them are zookeepers, and they bond with tigers and lions and things. But in the back of your mind, you have to think that these are still wild animals. These are still wild creatures, and they can turn on you at any moment. So you have to have some kind of healthy respect for them. And I think that Bunyip Man did have a healthy respect for the kaiju. It's just that maybe he was a little bit too idealistic, and he was a little bit blinded by the fact that they were still monsters.
This is true, but all I have to say is Blue treats Chris Pratt a heck of a lot nicer than this. I'm just saying.
That's true. That is true. I'm so looking forward to Dominion, by the way. Just sidebar.
Because Baby Blue.
Because, yeah, Beta's going to be awesome.
So anyway, that was the first shock, I would say, of this season. And something that we should mention here, because I know you and Travis talked about it at length, actually, in a couple of episodes about the whole Netflix thing with their animation department. But I don't think in this case that the Black is suffering because of that. I think the show was meant from the get-go to be 2 seasons, 14 episodes, and be done.
Yeah, because it just it does feel that way. It does absolutely feel that way. It feels
this feels like a basically a YA novel, a complete YA novel.
Yeah,
like
young adult.
Every episode could be a chapter, so in a YA novel.
Yeah, young adult. YA means young adult for the uninitiated, by the way.
Yeah. Because this very much feels like that. Especially with our 2 main characters being, I think they're 16. Oh well, no, I think Taylor is 16.
Haley.
Right? Yeah, Taylor. It's Taylor, and Haley's the girl. Yeah. So yeah, so I think Taylor's the older of the 2 of them.
Yeah.
So, like I said, this is a complete story. They accomplished their goal, and there really isn't much else to do with them after the story is done, because they got where they needed to. And spoiler warning, like we said before, the Jaeger doesn't make it. So if you were a fan of Atlas Destroyer, have your tissues ready.
Sorry about your damn luck. But yeah, that was really sad. I really wanted Atlas to make it to the end. But like you said, it is a complete story. Like the whole mission was to make it to the Sydney base and to be reunited with other people and try to find and I think that by this time they had already given up on trying to find their parents, except for, they obviously the twist of finding their mother among the kaiju
sisters.
The kaiju sisters. Yeah. So that was a huge twist.
Oh, and with Atlas Destroyer also went Loa.
Oh yeah, Loa, poor Loa. Like, because Loa became very sentient at the end, like very, very sentient.
She was almost a surrogate mother for them
in a way. Yes, because that ending speech where she's right before they self-destruct, and she's saying, she's basically saying, Haley, you've held this team together from day one. You've been the heart and soul. I'm paraphrasing. I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but she said, Loa said that, Haley had been the heart and soul of this mission since day one. Taylor was more of a leader than he essentially gave himself credit for.
And when he messed up, he owned it.
We'll
talk about that. He makes a very difficult call that doesn't make everyone happy.
No, not at all.
But that's kind of the theme in this. Not everyone makes perfect calls.
Well,
even our heroes.
No, it's part of, it's just part of I guess it's part of the journey. It's not every situation is perfect. And I was really hoping that it wouldn't become, I was really hoping that this wouldn't end in like a kind of sacrosanct kind of way. But it ended fairly hopeful, and that's what I'm and that's what I'm happy about. But we'll get into that.
Now that I think about it, there's a lot of death in that last episode. Lots of people die.
Well,
Lots of characters that we followed don't make it.
Some people that deserved it, some people deserve to die. But we'll get into that a little bit later. But let's start off. Let's continue the discussion because we like to do what we call the positivity sandwich on trademark, on Kaiju Weekly. So we're going to start with some positives. we're gonna sprinkle in some negativity onions, on this positivity cheeseburger. But it's all gonna work together, and it's all gonna come together in the end with some more positives. So Nate,
What was that, Jimmy? Yeah, you're making me hungry too.
Thanks. Well, I mean, I offered you guys lunch when you got here, but whatever. You said you had already eaten. At least that's what Nate told me, Jimmy. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, I got to have an in-flight meal on the way here. He didn't. He was piloting the big robot. So,
well, after we get done recording, I'll show you around town. There's a good Irish pub down the street that I can take.
Better Irish than Scottish. I've dealt with a Scottish man.
That's what I've heard for sure.
Yes.
So Nate, what has been some of your favorite? What was some of your like standout moments and standout things from Pacific Rim: The Black Season 2?
To be honest, I like the fact that the ending in this is really bittersweet, though a bit sweeter than bitter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But there was a heavy toll that the characters had to pay in order to accomplish their goals.
Right.
It wasn't easy.
No.
It was very, very hard. They had to grow up very quickly. Yeah. They lost a lot of people getting there, but they also gained some people along the way. They gained, Boy. Boy basically became their adopted little brother.
Well, they also Haley talked about after their mom officially passed away, Haley atop the Jaeger looks to May and says it's nice to have a sister.
Mm-hmm. May also kind of joins the family as well.
Mm-hmm.
And she needed one.
She
had been deprived of a family.
Yeah. And I just thought that was so interesting, that moment where Taylor and Haley's mom passes, or where they get Taylor and Haley get their mom back as another sort of pseudo parent figure in Shane dies.
Boy, how did you feel about Shane in this? The show really wants you to think that this, I'm not going to mince words, this bastard deserved the audience's sympathy by the end. It was working really hard, and the entire time I kept thinking to myself, is this deserved? Does this make sense?
If anything felt forced to me, I think it was a little bit of that. But the payoff of Shane's sacrifice, getting their mom back, that kind of overshadowed it for me a little bit. It all worked. Although it did feel, the Shane thing felt a little bit forced because in season 1, we hate Shane. In the first 3 episodes or so, we still hate Shane. Shane is trying to chase them down. But by the end of it, I'm a little bit more, I don't know, I'm a little bit, I don't know what the word is. I'm a little bit more forgiving now of Shane. Because I feel like in his own twisted way, maybe he was just trying to protect May.
Yeah, I think that is the idea here.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is that Shane is a man who's been hardened by being in the black.
Mm-hmm.
But he did genuinely care about May. He just felt that in order to get May to survive, he had to make her incredibly tough.
Mm-hmm.
And so everything he did in his own weird way, he did out of love. And I think the idea that we're getting here is that he's realizing that she can't stay with him anymore. She has to move on.
Yeah.
And I think for her, there is that weird, as much as she hates him, he's also the closest thing he's had to he's also the closest thing she's had to a father for years.
Yeah.
So like I said, this isn't quite as clear cut as what you might be used to from the movies.
Yeah, there's a lot of tragedy mixed in here.
And a lot of gray.
A lot of gray and a lot. It's really funny. There's a lot of gray area in the black.
That is kind of ironic, isn't it?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But this was also set up pretty well in season 1 with the being able to use the drift technology to enter people's minds, to do things like bury memories, alter memories. In this case, he's using it to get through to their mother and break the basically the brainwashing that this cult has done to their mother. It's actually really freaky. The Kaiju sisters are just really weird. We'll talk about that a little bit more later, I'm sure, but they are freaky. So he was trying to break the hold that they had on her, because it's part brainwashing, part seems like there's some telepathy going on with that as well. It's really weird.
Mm-hmm.
So she was constantly, even after she was free, she was constantly fighting their influence.
Yeah.
But he did it because he was the only one who could. And he knew that he would be helping Haley and Taylor, which in turn would make May, at least he thought, happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I like I said, it makes some sort of sense. It was just a little difficult for me to accept at first because, I was trained to hate Shane, Mr. You did. He even says that in the show.
but as we've kind of shown on our other show, The Power Trip, like villains can redeem themselves.
Yes. That is true. That is true. And I suppose it says something that him and Spider with a Y, I did look that up, Spider, they did chase after him. And Spider was even upset that because, spoiler warning, Shane dies saving their mother. And Spider was upset because Spider said, I would be, if it wasn't for Shane, I'd be dead. He taught me how to survive.
Yeah.
So I guess that reinforces the idea that when you're stuck out in one of the harshest of all wildernesses, it changes you. It makes you harder.
Mm-hmm.
Makes you meaner.
Mm-hmm.
You might start doing things you wouldn't normally do. But it also helps you survive.
Yeah, and through those hardships too, you wind up finding new, like you wind up finding both yourself and a little bit of family, especially if you're surrounded by especially if you're surrounded by people that are in a similar situation as you, where they have to adopt whatever persona it is they need to survive. They're essentially in kind of like the uncharted Wild West here, out in the middle of barren Australia. So they're just doing whatever they have to do, but there's also kind of those bonding moments out there too, because you're both, you're all trying to survive together.
But this show also proves not everyone is safe, as we've been pointing out, because there are characters who die. And so I got to a point where I'm like, I don't know who's going to make it. I really don't know who's going to make it.
Well, that's the mark of a good show, though. That's the mark of a good writing and a good show, when it's not predictable. When it's not predictable. Now, to be fair, I predicted the Bunyip Man being eaten. I saw that foreshadowed a mile away. I feel like the guy. I just feel like that he was destined. That character was destined to die. In a way, I almost saw. I did not expect them to be able to resurrect, or maybe not to resurrect their mother. I was not really expecting them to be able to do that. I honestly thought that they would lose her in the drift, that she would die and wither away, like Shane. But I kind of saw her. I kind of saw that her death. I kind of saw her death coming too. That part was a little bit predictable.
But I was not. The show really does mess with you because we get a moment where I'm like, wait a minute, there's still a couple of episodes left. Why are we getting to the base now?
Mhm.
Okay, maybe something else. They got something else cooking, and then everything just seemed way too easy, way
Squishy.
too clean, and I'm like, something's not quite right here.
Yeah.
But I wasn't quite sure what was going on, and then we get that gut punch where you find out that because when they're there, they find their dad and their parents get reunited. It's all sweet and nice. It's great. Everyone's happy. And then it turns out it was all an illusion made with the drifting technology so they could ease their mother into
Into death.
death.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my good. Thank you, show. What are you doing?
And it's
Stop it.
I just feel like it's so like it's so ironic, I guess, that we're recording this on Mother's Day, and
Yeah.
this entire season 2, like the back half of this season revolves around their family and their well, the whole season really revolves around them, losing their parents. Like that's the whole reason why
Yeah.
they're on.
There's a motherly through line in this because there's
Mhm.
their mother. The leader of the Kaiju sisters is, well, I guess this is no surprise because they're the Kaiju sisters, but you have this basically witch mother, the
Mhm.
leader of the cult, who is this very twisted sort of mother, leading them. And then when we actually see her at the end in the last episode, she is this ridiculous, just old crone. it's, it's this emaciated, crazy looking pseudo kaiju crone. I mean, it's just
Mm.
wow. And she's, like I said, she's kind of a twisted version of a mother. She's performing all of these weird ceremonies. She's declaring, we saw this at the end of season 1, she was declaring Boy this kaiju messiah,
Mhm.
and they had to do all of these things to empower him and make him able to go do whatever he needed to do. And what was funny is then, as their last ditch effort to get Boy back, and I think they actually said like Boy was only a category 2.
Yeah, he was a 2.
He's not a big boy.
No.
He's a kaiju, but he's not a big boy. He's been on the small side for kaiju. And then they decide to whip out a category 6, which I think might be the biggest kaiju ever, other than like the ridiculous Voltron kaiju from Uprising. But the less said about that, the better. But they whip out a category 6. I'm like, if you can control a category 6, why do you need Boy? Well, it's because Boy is like a Wolverine. He's tiny, but he's vicious.
He's scrappy.
That would Scrappy Doo.
Raggy. I can't do it. He's very scrappy, that becomes very apparent when Apex shows up to try
Yes,
and bring Boy back.
yes,
Um,
because the sisters do manage to exert their influence on Boy.
mm,
But then Apex, the Kaiju Jaeger hybrid from season 1, who had developed a bit of an affinity with Boy, then uses the drifting technology in him to basically get through to Boy, while also getting the snot kicked out of him, I might add. But he took it because he knew he needed to save Boy from the Kaiju sisters.
mm.
And so then we have this weird little hybrid thing, not little, but he gets to be a hero too. And we weren't sure what to think of Apex in season 1.
Mhm.
And then he makes a sacrifice. There's so many so many characters, I should say, who are just making big sacrifices for our main characters so they can, be safe. It's crazy.
Yeah, so I was a little bit I was a little bit disappointed in, but I understand why. Like Apex being this mech kaiju hybrid, makes as big and as intimidating as it is, makes this kind of sacrifice to save Boy for the greater, because Boy, just to keep Boy out of the hands of the kaiju witches, the kaiju sisters. I keep wanting to call them the kaiju witches. I don't know why.
Oh,
Probably
that
just
would be an accurate description.
the kaiju witches. Yeah, the kaiju witches. Which, by the way, are they is their backstory kind of described better in the comics? Because I've not read the comics.
I haven't read the comics yet either, but yeah, they're not original to this. They've been established before.
Yeah. Yeah, because that was the only kind of disappointment for me for this whole show, was there was really no backstory given with the kaiju sisters.
There's some implied.
There's some implied.
There's implied stuff, and we find out that May. I thought for a second they're going to say May was one of them for a while. No, it's not that. They tried to recruit her, but she successfully resisted, but they messed with her head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So she does not appreciate them trying again.
I don't know. Maybe they could have like drugged this out, maybe like one or two more episodes, and did one of those episodes and showed sort of the backstory of the Kaiju sisters, just kind of how that started, because it is a really interesting group of women. They're a cult who worship kaiju, and they kill they literally
kill the men.
They kill the men, and
basically what they said was they go into new territory, they kill all the men, and they take all the women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
to build their
basically
army.
Brainwash them into this cult.
Yeah. And there's not very many of them. There's only like a dozen of them, from what I gather. And they all pretty much get wiped out at the end from a missile attack.
They think Boy is special, because we find out, and this was one of those mysteries from season 1 that was brewing the entire show, and then it gets explained in 30 seconds toward the end. In the last scene, we find out that Boy is a human kaiju hybrid. We do have it confirmed for us that, yes, he was made by the precursors as a basically kind of a Trojan horse weapon. So he looks human. He can pass for human, but he's actually a kaiju. And then he can Hulk out and go nuts.
Right.
So, that's all confirmed for us, but that's why the sisters think he's special.
Mm-hmm.
Which it makes some sort of twisted sense. Let's be honest. Doomsday death cults don't necessarily make a whole lot of sense. You just need to understand their internal logic.
Well, it makes sense. It does make sense because Boy was sent by a higher power. He was not of this earth. He was not human, at least not fully human. And he held some kind of high enough. There was a clear enough like status or distinction between human and kaiju to make him special. So calling him the kaiju messiah or the kaiju savior or whatever is not off base, and makes total sense. I just kind of find it weird that they didn't, that they wanted him because he was a boy. He was, but I guess it's, I don't know.
What, because they're the kaiju sisters and they kill all the men, but it's okay that he's a boy?
Yeah.
Yeah, but they realize that he's half human and half kaiju, so he's special.
Right.
So because he's special, that must mean XYZ, according to their beliefs.
Maybe, according to their ideology.
Yeah. Their theology?
Their
very twisted, weird theology. So, in Christian theology, Jesus is both God and man. Maybe they're thinking the same thing.
Maybe.
He's both kaiju and human.
Maybe. He's both God and man. or
To a
in
certain
their
extent.
to an extent, yeah, to an extent. I can
Yes.
see that. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
but it is really interesting that they worship or they look to Boy as their savior, their messiah. Um and Boy is not even all that impressive. Really is not even all that impressive of a kaiju, except for he's just very tough and scrappy. And
He's very scrappy.
yeah, so
He
it's not
almost killed Apex while Apex was trying to help him.
right. So, so we like I said, we do find out that we do find out that uh Boy is a hybrid. He was sent here as essentially a weapon,
And yeah,
and
and the
that's where the
military found him and captured him and was studying him, but then
Mhm.
that lab was in a city that was attacked, and that's where Tay and Hay found him, and the rest is history. So it all gets explained to us pretty quickly, and like, oh, okay, well, solves that problem. Feels a little rushed, but okay.
but at least it pays off. At least it
It
pays
pays
off.
off for sure. I guess I was expecting more. I probably shouldn't have expected more, because if there was more, I think it might have given the Kaiju sisters a little too much legitimacy if he was some sort of, special destroyer or whatever sent by the precursors. Might have given like I said, the sisters a little too much legitimacy, but
Yeah. So we talked a lot about in the last episode, and I know I feel like we're front loading this with a lot of positive because there's a lot of good stuff to say about
Well,
this.
there is one negative that I'm going to bring up that is also, but it's related to a positive, if that makes any sense.
Okay, go for it. Because I was going to ask you. I was actually going to ask you what you thought of the overall just of the animation, because I know Travis and I complained a lot about the animation
Well,
in the last episode
are
we
you
talked about
ready?
Ultraman.
Are you ready to be disappointed a little bit?
Fine, go ahead.
You know who worked on this?
No, I don't actually.
It's Polygon.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Same guys who did the
Singular
Godzilla
Point.
anime trilogy.
Didn't they do Singular Point, or was that somebody else? I can't
There was
remember.
somebody else, because that
Okay.
wasn't CGI.
Oh, that was Orange. That was
was
Orange.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Which is kind of weird, because even though this was done by Polygon, it feels really different in terms of animation compared to the anime trilogy.
Mhm.
But Polygon also did work on Star Wars: The Clone Wars.
Mhm.
So, and that feels very different from it as well. So, if anyone has any ire for the for Polygon's Godzilla trilogy, I don't think you have as much to worry about in this. And this also has the benefit of being, shall we say, livelier than the Ultraman series on Netflix.
You mean not? Are you talking about like as far as like not being so bleak? Is that what you're talking about?
No, more like how outside of the fight scenes, the animation's a little stiff. Because this
Okay.
doesn't feel stiff. These characters are incredibly lively and
Oh, they
expressive.
are. They are. They are. Okay. So
Very.
people have
Now,
probably.
admittedly, the weird but story significant dance scene. We talked about that in the first episode from last season. That was a little awkward, but that's about as awkward as I think it gets. Otherwise, these characters, their expressions match what they're actually saying. I remember you and Travis brought that up for Ultraman Season 2. And boy, howdy, do I have opinions about Ultraman Season 2. Oh, boy. Spoiler warning, people. I'll be writing reviews for Kaiju Ramen for both Season 2 of this and Ultraman. And let's just say, telegraphing the end a little bit, I'm going to be a heck of a lot nicer to the black. Oh.
Oh, I'm sure you will, because this
had one more episode than Ultraman in its second season, and the pacing is a heck of a lot better.
for sure.
That's
For
what
sure.
kills Ultraman for me. But anyway, we're not here to talk about that.
Right. No, the pacing of this
but the characters are very expressive and what they're saying matches how they're looking. Sometimes they even just use the expressions to communicate things that aren't being said. There's I'm trying to remember exactly. It's been a little while since I watched season 2, but there's a scene where May doesn't even say anything. She's just talking to Shane. She doesn't even say anything to him.
Yeah.
It's all in the expression.
Mm.
And or no, maybe she was talking to Spider. Yeah, I think that's what it was. Because Spider was trying to get her to come with him. He's like, just leave the kids and come with me. And there's no dialogue between them. You just see Spider leave while and you just get a reaction shot of her while she's thinking about it. And then the next shot is Spider is driving away in his little speeder bike thing. And then she just goes back to the kids. She's a little older than our brother and sister here. So they get a younger brother and boy, and they get an older sister with May. It's interesting how that works out. But one of the little negatives that I'm going to give that is kind of couched in a positive is I'm sure for some people they're going to be disappointed that Haley doesn't do as much Jaeger piloting this season as she did last season. And that's in large part because she spends most of her time taking care of Boy. Because Boy, he does revert back to his human form, but that's because he got bit by a kaiju tick, which is just a horrifying idea. That latches onto his chest. And that's why they were going to Bunyip Man, because they wanted Bunyip Man to take the tick off and save his life. So she's basically tending to him like a mother the entire time. She kind of becomes Boy's. I don't know if you would you say she's more like a big sister or like a mother to Boy?
She's a little bit motherly. She's a little bit more on the motherly side, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm sure some people will be upset with the fact that she doesn't get to do as much Jaeger piloting and she's tending to Boy like a mother the entire time. Yeah. Well, not the entire time, but a good chunk of the time. And May picks up the slack and does the Jaeger piloting. Okay. So some people will be upset with that, but I liked seeing Haley do that because it just makes the most sense. I think Boy needs a motherly influence, and that's definitely not coming from Taylor, because Taylor's too worried about being the older brother and taking care of everybody.
Right.
And May's not going to do it because May's busted. All kinds of busted. And is borderline butch at points because she's just had to be so hardened by surviving in the wilderness. I
don't think butch is the right word. I think it's just hardened. Because she's still very feminine, but she's just very, very hardened by the situation. She's been very, very hardened by the life that she's had to live, and the reason, and she's had to survive all these years.
Yeah. So it needed to come from somebody, and it makes sense for her. And Haley gets very upset and very protective of Boy. Because there comes a point where, when we talked about characters making tough decisions, there's a point where Taylor thinks that if they're going to get out of the sisters' territory, if all they want is Boy,
but
she's trying to give them Boy.
Yeah, she's trying to make the pragmatic choice in that moment.
He's trying to make what he thinks is the pragmatic choice. And that upsets his sister because he basically does it in secret. She says, "No, we're not giving them Boy." But then he sneaks off in the middle of the night and gives them Boy. And that makes her angry. And she's like, "How dare you do that? We were supposed to take care of it." He's like, "I had to make a tough call." And you know what? It makes perfect sense for both of them to feel that way. And I don't know if the show is necessarily siding with one or the other, which is kind of interesting. But you can see where both of them are coming from. It's one of those, it's like Spock in Star Trek 2. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. We give them Boy, and we don't even know what exactly Boy is. He seems to be a monster. Let them have him so that we can get out. But May is trying to say, like, you can't trust them. You don't know what they're going to do. If you give them Boy, God only knows what they're going to do. And Haley's just like, I just love Boy. How dare you? She even says that. It's like, you took away somebody I love.
Mm-hmm.
Just one of those things. Like we find out at the end of the show, the black changes you. And sometimes it's for the better. Sometimes it's for the worse.
There's as kind of bleak as this, as bleak, hang on. We alluded to this when we first started the show, and as bleak and as dark and as unsafe for our characters as this feels, there is a lot of hopefulness in this show. There's a lot of hope. There's a lot of, like I said, we were talking about themes before we recorded. And you said to me, the show is about hope and is about family. I think we've already talked about the family aspect of it. There's a very like motherly through line throughout the Black. In season 1, it was, I don't know, maybe it was like more of a fatherly through line in season 1, because we have Taylor kind of taking responsibility and establishing himself as a leader. So there's that fatherly, more masculine side.
Whereas, and you also had Shane,
Shane,
who was more involved in season 1 than he was in season 2.
Right, but in season 2, there's the other side of it. There's the feminine. There's the motherly side, the more tender side to it, which can also be incredibly tragic as well. As we find out that there are moments where I thought Boy was going to die. When you told me that be prepared to have your heart ripped out, I sincerely thought Boy was going to die. But there's this kind of motherly through line in season 2 with Haley
and Loa.
Yep. And on the
their mother,
and their mother, of course, and with
and even the sisters, like I said, because they're kind of a twisted version of, especially their leaders is very twisted, sort of, like what do they call those? In nunneries, the head nun. What are it's the something mother? You know what I'm talking about?
I almost said the Queen Mother.
No, I'm not Catholic, so I don't know these things.
I'm not Catholic either, so I don't know. Anyway, I know I'll have to look it up. But anyway, go continue.
But no, that's just what I'm saying. There is a very kind of feminine, motherly influence throughout the whole thing, and actually looking at it as kind of two sides of a whole actually makes sense, because season 1 was a little bit more focused on Taylor. And him doing crazy things, sometimes questionable things, the learning how to ghost drift, which about breaks his brain, and having and then Shane and what he's doing, and to manipulating people and things like that, and kind of twisted things that he was doing. And I could see that. I think you're onto something there.
Yeah. So there's like, it's this season 2, which I guess it really was so appropriate that, this was only like a 2-season show, where in season 1, you get the father patriarchal side, and you get the mother matriarchal side of it in season 2, or season 1, I should say. In season 1, you get the patriarchal father side. In season 2, you get the mother matriarchal side. So they both work in tandem to tell a very cohesive, kind of hopeful story, because there are points in the show that are a little bit, I won't say saccharine, but they're a little bit sweet, especially the end is a little bit, it's a little bit more sweet than bitter, like we talked about. But I think that
we should say this: their father is alive.
Their father is alive. Yeah,
their father is alive. Their parents got separated. They're both Jaeger pilots. Their parents got separated. The sisters found their mother, but their dad did make it to Sydney base.
Yeah.
So they at least got to see their father. Now, the last scene of the show is them going to, I guess you could say, the it's not really a grave because they don't have a body, but the memorial site for their mother.
Mhm.
And their father, grieves the loss of his wife.
Yeah.
And then they have a little talk with everybody, and you get the impression that this new family is going to move on, is going to move forward.
Mhm.
The kids made it. They lost they lost Loa, they lost Atlas. Apex didn't make it, their mother didn't make it. Shane didn't make it. A lot of people died, but they got there. They met their goal. They got to the base and they found their dad at the very least. They did find their mother, but she didn't, but like I said, she didn't make it, but she died making sure that they would.
It's just a more whole, I guess our characters, although they're kind of, they've experienced some very tragic things. They seemed very hopeful at the end that things were actually going to kind of work out. And I think that ending this season or ending this series there was good. I don't think you could probably pull another story out from this. And I hope that
maybe they have to escape from Australia or something like that.
Yeah, maybe. But if they don't and they just leave it there, I'm satisfied.
I'm very satisfied with this. I honestly don't really want to see anymore. As much as I like these characters, I really don't want to see anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy with where it's at.
Yeah. Yeah, I am too. So it sounds like we can kind of head into our final thoughts and our Godzuki score. And for the uninitiated, if this is your first time listening to Kaiju Weekly, we like to rate movies and television shows out of 5 Godzukis because we like to embrace the sillier side of the giant monster and tokusatsu genre. So Nate, I'm going to let you go first. Out of 5 Godzukis, what would you give Pacific Rim the Black, and what are your final thoughts?
Oh man. Yeah, you're talking to somebody who absolutely adores that first Pacific Rim movie. So going into the whole show, I was a little bit trepidatious. I felt burned by Uprising. So I wasn't sure what to think of this one going in. And then, it's animated, which is also different, but there's a lot of anime influence in Pacific Rim. So now that we have the complete story, I don't quite remember what I gave season 1. I think I gave season 1 4.
Mm-hmm.
So now that we have the complete story, it's difficult. I'm waffling between 2 different scores. I reserve the right to change my mind for the magazine review, but for now, I'm going to give it 4 out of 5 Godzukis. No, Jimmy, I'm not singing karaoke with Jessica.
I was gonna ask Jimmy. Jimmy, since you're here, and since you're obviously another guest on this podcast, what would you give Pacific Rim the Black?
Oh, of course you would give it a 5 out of 5. You're in love with robots.
That's what I thought. Okay. All right. So for me, I'm very inclined to agree with you in the fact that in the fact that I don't think that it's perfect, but it does work as a whole. And I really want to take Pacific Rim the Black as kind of as the whole package. I don't want to necessarily take it in just season 1 versus season 2. I really want
you can't really do that. You have to take this as a whole
to really appreciate what they were able to accomplish with the story and the characters and the creatures. We didn't spend a lot of time on the kaiju because I feel like the kaiju were like sort of a given because, we had a few different ones in this. We had Trespasser, which is a throwback from if anyone's familiar with the Pacific Rim the movie. We had Trespasser, we had the
kaiju dogs,
the kaiju dogs,
the big old category 6 at the end, and
the big old category 6 at the end with the name of it escapes me. But this this show is definitely a human story. It is definitely a very, very human story. And I think it strikes a good balance between kaiju and human story. And it does it does do well to have it does do well at being extremely cohesive. And I think that taking it as a whole, Pacific Rim season 1, Pacific Rim season 2, I'm going to go ahead and just give it a I'm going to be a little bit nicer to it because I did enjoy this a lot and it did make me actually feel something. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a 4.5 out of 5 Godzookies, which
I put serious thought into giving it 4.5.
Yeah, which is a stark contrast to my 1 out of 5 I gave Ultraman season 2.
Oh, by the way, the category 6 is Breacher.
Oh, Breacher. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, okay. I was like, that actually does. Okay, so I was sitting here watching. I was like, oh, Breacher. That makes sense because it's big enough to breach the. Anyway, to make it through the breach. Anyway, whatever.
Yeah. Yes, Jimmy, I did beat you to that. I'm learning.
But Jimmy is still smarter. Moving on.
Don't bloat his ego.
So that concludes our discussion on Pacific Rim the Black Season 2. If you have watched Pacific Rim the Black Season 2 and have listened to this podcast, talk to us on social media, talk to us on Twitter, and tell us what you think of Pacific Rim. Do you like it? Do you hate it? Do you think it was better than Ultraman? If you do, we can be friends. If not, well, not so much. And just let us know by tweeting at us or emailing us at kaijuweekly@gmail.com. So
that music cue is going to haunt your nightmares.
Hey, but at least I got a perfect 10 out of 10 plus bonus. Nathan, thank you for coming back and for being on this podcast. We appreciate you for filling in for Travis and discussing Pacific Rim the Black with me. Mm-hmm. Where can people find you?
Monster Island. You should come visit beautiful Ogasso. Oh wait, sorry. I slipped into my show. Sorry. Didn't mean to do that. Actually, yes, you can come visit Monster Island if you so choose, or you can listen to our show, the Monster Island Film Vault, a podcast seeking entertainment and enlightenment through tokusatsu. It is an academic film appreciation show, and I know that sounds kind of impossible and kind of boring. Let me assure you, it is far from boring. I mean, you should listen to the quips Jimmy has on that show. They're zingers, let me tell you. And then I would be doubly remiss, if I did not mention the other shows that I do with the two fine gentlemen who co-host this podcast. One of which is Henshin Men, a podcast that's about the appreciation of Japanese superheroes and their high-flying and high-kicking adventures, which I co-host with our co-host in common, Mr. Travis Alexander. It's about Henshin heroes, and we are currently making our way through the original Kamen Rider, which feels longer than it actually is at this point. I'm liking the show, but good Lord, it feels so long right now. And then obviously we have to talk about what for you is the most important podcast in the Kaiju Ramen podcasting network, right?
Yes, and that is The Power Trip, a journey through the Power Rangers franchise. It's where you and I talk about Power Rangers from an academic level, and we analyze the Ranger teams, the Zords, the music, all of that stuff, and we try to mix in a little bit of the thematic things just to keep things spicy. So if you want to check that out, you can find us on Power Trip Pod. You can find us at Power Trip Pod, the Power Trip Pod on Twitter. I almost screwed that up. Mm-hmm. And if you want to email the show, you can email that show at powertrippod@gmail.com. Mm-hmm. But I also need...
And when you're listening to this episode, I believe our episode on Time Force should be out, right?
Tentatively, yes.
We talked about it for 4 hours, people.
It was a 4-hour recording. Let that sink in, audio listener. It was a 4-hour recording about a Power Rangers television series that went to places that I did not expect it to. Well, actually, I kind of expected it to be quite honest with you, because it was such an in-depth season, and in-depth discussion.
Yeah,
And yes,
for
Jimmy, I know you're not a big fan of Power Rangers, but the least you could do is listen to the show and support us.
Oh, well, we did have some dealings with a former Power Ranger and
Oh,
former
I know.
Power Ranger villain.
Yeah, it's your island crush, right, Miss Perkins?
Well, she kind of electrocuted me, so kind of killed the attraction there. Anyway, I would have preferred a 3-hour tour, but we talked for Time Force for 4 hours, so we made time for Time Force.
Good Lord. Thank you, everyone, for listening and sharing this podcast with your friends. If you want to follow us on Twitter, we are at Kaiju Weekly. All the links to our social media, as well as the Power Rangers Legacy Facebook group, are listed in the description of this episode. You can send questions, comments, or answers to the trivia question to our email at kaijuweekly@gmail.com. A big thank you to everyone who has supported Kaiju Ramen Magazine thus far. We are currently working on issue 6. That should be out in the next month or so. That should be out in the next couple of months, so be on the lookout for that. You can find out more about that and other podcasts and other projects that we have going on at kaijuramenmedia.com. And there's also one more thing you can do to help support this show, and that is by going over to Apple Podcasts or Podchaser and leaving us a rating, a 5-star rating,
And Spotify.
And leaving us a 5-star rating or a 5-star review. And we promise we will read that review on a future episode of the podcast. We actually did I think we got a new review, but I'm going to save that for when Travis is on again, before I go ahead and read that. So
I wondered that too. Did you say Power Rangers Legacy and not Kaiju Groupie?
I did.
You forgot what show you were recording there for a second.
No, that was intentional. So
I don't know how Travis is going to feel about that.
The last thing we need to say is to help control the giant monster population, have your
breachers
or your kaiju sisters spayed or neutered.